Hi everyone. I'm super excited to host Milos. He's CEO and founder of Programming Architecture, and I've been following his work on YouTube for a while, and it's really technical and super inspiring. So I thought I should get him on the show. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, people who don't know about you, and if I were to ask three career highlights of your journey, what would those be?
Career highlights, let's say, first of all, I would say my PhD, because that's important, that's the education. And during my PhD, I kind of got into this lane that got me here. I learned how to program better, I got into computational design, learned how to write plugins for Rhino and so on. So that would be the first kind of big milestone. Then the second milestone was after I finished my PhD when I decided to start my own company, to start doing the services that I'm working on, that I'm offering. And that was kind of a very hard decision, but I guess the right one. And then there are some other milestones that are related to different projects. I think that what I would take out of or emphasize would be the Las Vegas sphere that we worked on 2-3 years ago, because when we worked on the Las Vegas sphere and we developed all the fabrication drawings and everything, it was kind of a culmination of all the knowledge that we had, and it was a proof to ourselves that we can handle projects of that size with just a couple of people and so on, that the automation really works. I mean, I get to prove that with every step of the way, with every project, but somehow this one was so complicated and so immense, so that it was proof for all of us. So that's what I would say. I would say the PhD, the making of my own company, and then working on the Las Vegas sphere as one of the last projects. Of course, there are many others now, but those would be the highlights.
That's amazing. Like I've seen the visuals of the sphere, and it's a piece of marvel and art.
Yeah.
And Milos, who would be the people or mentors along your career made a big impact?
Well, I mean, I studied architecture in Serbia. That's where I'm from, Serbia, and I finished architecture there. I went to do my PhD in Stuttgart, Germany. So in Serbia, there were a couple of professors that were influencing my journey, and they were basically nudging me toward the right direction. They were saying, "Come on, come to my studio, be a assistant, and so on, help us." And those were mostly people from the technical subjects like structural analysis, concrete structures, and that's how I slowly got onto more technical side of architecture. And then when I did my PhD, I did my PhD with Professor Jan Knippers in Stuttgart, and he is the founder of Knippers Helbig Structural Office. And we were on the 4th floor, and on the 10th floor was the Achim Menges, the ICD, Institute of Computational Design. So he came to be a professor a year or 2 years after I started my PhD. So then our two institutes started developing those pavilions that are now famous in our computational design world. I wanted to say that Professor Knippers influenced me a lot in a positive way. He introduced me to his office. In his office, I worked on these amazing projects like this Shenzhen airport designed by Fuchsas, on the Missile mall designed by Fuchsas, like some very large scale projects, mostly completely free form, all facade elements different, all structural elements different. So he was guiding me through that. He was guiding me through my PhD. So he influenced me a lot. Afterwards, when I started my own company, it was hard to rely on outside influences. So there were not so many mentors. So I had to be my own mentor most of the time. There's lots of friends and colleagues that influenced my journey, but I think that was what I can remember now. If I remember more during the conversation, I'll let you know.
For sure. From what I know, you have so many diverse skill sets from like architecture, computational design, programming, running your own business, YouTube, like content creation, branding. You also stay up to date with the technology. So what's your like lifestyle or framework that keeps you up to date with learning new things faster and being up?
I think, I mean, there is a little bit of an obsession. So you have to be a little bit obsessed. And there is a love for me for visual things. So when I was 7 or 8 years old, I had like a Commodore 64 computer. And the Commodore 64 computer had like a BASIC, you can program in language BASIC, and there was a so-called Simon's BASIC. It was a bit expanded on the normal language. And when I was 8 years old, I remember I was writing some for loops, like some algorithms that generated some kind of rectangles that were moving that looked like snakes. And since then, I remember I was always fascinated with anything visual. So whether it's videos or video editing, image editing, but mostly graphics and mostly 3D. So there is this obsession that always made me want to learn. I learned Unreal Engine, like to use very well, although I don't use it in practice, but I know how to use it really well. So from the early age, I was really, really drawn into film. I think that if I didn't study architecture, I would have liked to study film. So I was always had a knack toward recording and editing. So I learned how to use those editing software early on. So at one point at the beginning of my career, I thought, why not use that skill set as well? Try to make a YouTube channel, see what comes out of it. Unfortunately, I don't have time to do it as much as I want. I post a video every month or so, but still, I mean, it's of some value. I see that some people like it. So it's this obsession toward visual, and there is very little time. So the downside of that kind of obsession is that nowadays we can do everything we want, and that's at the same time a problem because you have to choose now. Because you can do anything. If you want to learn how to do genetics now, no one is stopping you. You can go online and learn how to be an expert in genetics. But the problem is you have to choose. And when I choose a lot of things. So I'm always in a rush. Always in a rush. Everything I do in a rush. And the good thing is that I thrive under this pressure. So I'm kind of used to do everything in a rush. I'm never really relaxed. That's the problem. But I get to do a lot of stuff fast because when I experiment and I research, I almost follow that Mark Zuckerberg's motto, the Meta's motto, which is move fast and break things, right? When I do research, I just try things, try and move fast. Don't care about errors, setting things up, and so that's how I get to learn and progress. I think fast in different areas, but yeah. There's a lot of because you don't really have time to relax or watch a movie or play video games because especially because I have two small kids, so the time is unbelievably tight.
Yeah, like prioritizing and time management has become more and more difficult because now even with ChatGPT and other like you can learn so much about a new topic and area with like so much less barrier. So like from throughout your career, can you share about the difficult choices you had to make and how did you navigate those difficult times?
But the most difficult choice is the first one, is to be outside of the employment system, right? To have your own company. I think people don't really understand. I mean, the ones that work for offices don't really understand how difficult that is. Because if you work for an office, let's say you get a job at Zaha Architects or Foster and Partners or I don't know whom, the 100% of your work is to do your work. That's what you're concerned with. You're not concerned about anything else. If you have your own company, maybe 20% of your brain is concerned about doing the work and 80% is about administration and mostly about finding clients or finding new work. In our area especially, that's extremely difficult because I work, or we computational designers work on very complex projects usually. For simple projects, people don't use computational design that much. What does that mean? Complex projects are developed by very large companies. You have companies like Arup or I don't know that actually have whole teams of computational designers that are employed. And their goal is not always to outsource. Most of the time, their goal is to keep it inside. So you get work only if you're better than their internal team. So you always have to stay cutting edge, or you have to lower the prices so much that they pay you less than they would pay internally. But that's rarely the case because they when they use internal teams, they of course think long term. So they would always prefer to keep it in house. So and then that's why people don't understand how difficult it is to actually find clients, form connections, offer things that they cannot do internally, and so on. So that's the biggest challenge. The other challenge I found was that in my career, I imagined I will work with architects a lot. Almost until 2 years ago, I worked zero with architects. Zero, almost zero. So now in the last 2 years, I started collaborating with a very good Austrian office, DTFLR, formerly called Dietrich Untertrifaller, and they are very open-minded, and so they're helping me introduce computational design for them. We're developing a whole system with Revit and Rhino inside, and developing our own components, and they realize that we can do so much computational design out for orthogonal buildings, let's say, not freeform buildings. But before that, the architects just didn't have this need. They had this computational design in some design phases, but it was more like more a play. You play to find some design, but then you're done with it. And most of the time, they got satisfied with some interns or someone that knows a little bit of Grasshopper, and they thought that's enough. And from the start, I realized that's not the biggest value that computational design offers. The biggest value is the automated creation of detailed elements, detailed plans, CNC files ready for production. There is so much more to automate in this phase. Design phase is cool, it's nice, but there is so much more, and architects weren't really involved in those phases that much. These big offices, they do the first design stages and then just let someone take over. So I usually work for those ones that take over. They take over, and then I help them automate everything from that design to the production. So the challenge for me is to finally find architects that are willing to cooperate, because I wanted that. I wanted to be part of the design, and I wanted to show that you should integrate computational design from the start through the whole process. So I finally managed in the last year or two to enter that space, but that's one of the biggest challenges, to show this. I mean, there are others, but we can talk about this for 3 hours. But let's narrow it down to those two: finding work, finding clients, and going more into the direction of architects and architecture.
And as you said, it's computational design, software development, consultancies is a niche, and also you have to be like top 1% or very best to get work, because as you said, they have 10 reasons to do internally. You have
Yeah.
to find one strong reason to get a outsider person, and it takes time to find the positioning, differentiation, build the network, so there's constant source of clients.
You always have to stay cutting edge, because whatever you're doing now for whoever, they take that and say, okay, now we're going to try to do it ourselves next time. And then you have to come and say, yes, but now I can do this on top as well. Now I can do this on top as well. So you always have to do the up the game, to what can be done and how.
And if you were to start your business now, is there anything which you would do differently?
Yes. I read this book. It was about the office. I forgot the name, actually. Let me see. I have it here somewhere. This book, it's called Designing a World-Class, it's mirrored probably, Designing a World-Class Architecture Firm by Patrick McLeamy. He's the one that actually made that McLeamy curve, the famous McLeamy curve. So he was one of the CEOs of Choka, the architectural office. And he explains this history, how they created that office like 100 years ago. And one of the partners, that they had a division between three partners. One was concerned with the design, and one was concerned with structural efficiency and technical details and so on. And the third one was only about finding clients, only about networking. And he said that throughout his career, he saw so many architectural offices rise up and disappear. And we can see that every day. We can see architectural offices that get a huge project. Suddenly they have 100 employees. And then next year they go down to 10 employees because their project was, and they just bubble up and down like crazy. And he said he noticed that 100 years ago. And he said, we're not going to do that. We have to constantly do networking and client searching, because I know that if I go to lunch with someone today, maybe in 7 years from now, a project will come from them. Maybe, but I have to be constantly in a loop. So if I was starting an office today, I would definitely try to either invest a lot more of my own time into that, or more ideally, find a partner that just does that. Or it's mostly concentrated on that. And finding a partner in general is a great idea. I didn't do that. I found it solo. I'm still solo in that sense. I have a lot of collaborations, still solo, but finding a partner is great. And if you do that, then make sure you don't do the same thing, because there's a lot of things to cover. And if you have both of partners or three partners or one person trying to do the design, trying to do the client finding, trying to do this, you get overwhelmed. As I said, people really underestimate how hard it is, how to find clients into our project. So that's something I would really concentrate on if I was to start again.
Running a one-person company is like all the stress. Sometimes you could. I read this book recently. It's changed my perspective about running business, like who, not how. And it says like, okay, like when we want clients or other thing, like we're like, okay, how can we grow the business? But it shared stories about, okay, if you can bring the right people and collaborate, and then as a whole that could leverage to the next level. I'm curious to know, like, every day when you wake up, what drives you and motivates you?
It's something that I don't know where it comes from. But there is some desire for innovation and some desire for creating something new, and I don't know where that comes from, because sometimes I feel like we that have that, we feel very trapped by it, because you can't get released, because it doesn't let you go. And so there is some drive for innovation and some drive for creating something new, and that motivates me. So why is that there? I don't know. So I can definitely say it's not like about the money or anything. It's about creating something new and bringing something of value. The question where that comes from, I don't think we can pinpoint. Some can say it's the bringing up. Maybe it's the way you were brought up. But as I am getting older and I have kids, I see that a lot of these things are born into you. Like when you get kids and you have a couple of kids and you see how different they are, you realize a lot of the things are much more nature than nurture. You are born with so much of character and drives and motivations. Because my father was a type that, that type that says like second place doesn't matter, only the first place matters. Like you have to be the best. He wasn't really strict or putting that much pressure, but he had that type of personality, that says you have to be number one. So I always used to think, this is why I feel like I need to do stuff to progress to the top. And so because he raised me that way. But the older I think that was there from the get-go. He was just speaking to something that was already there. So the motivation is basically internal, and I don't know if you can fabricate it. I realize that some people just have that. If you ask them, why do you create movies? Why do you create films? Why do you create anything? You can notice that passion and obsession, but most of them would not be able to tell you why. It's just there. Yeah.
Interesting. Like, I can connect with you a lot. I also run like a solo person farm. And what I believed is like using right tools, like with ChatGPT, Claude, like I feel I'm 10x more productive. And which makes me think, like, what's your take on technology native or AI native architecture firms or AEC firms that could, like, that are being born right now, and how would that change?
Well, I think it will change a lot. Architectural profession is famously conservative, right? Like they're so late to the game. I mean, the BIM is like 30 years there, and there's still many offices that they still do 2D drawing and I don't know what. So it's crazy. It will be crazy to see how fast they start using AI. But I think it will change a lot. First, when it appeared, ChatGPT, I was like, okay, we're safe, because ChatGPT is text-based, and then we had Midjourney, which is image-based, and I said, this is great, we're still safe, because we create geometry, and there are no models that are trained on geometry. And it's very hard to train on geometry because you don't have this data set like the internet. You don't have some data set of 1 million IFC buildings, and then you can train on them. Like there is no, so it's a bad thing for the industry, but it's a good thing now for AI, because we could train an AI model on that. I'm sure that Autodesk or someone is working on that, but we'll see. At first I thought that, but then I realized, and you can see that in one of my recent videos and in one of my recent attempts, I realized that you don't need that. So what you need is you can create a function that creates a geometry, and a function is a text. Function is a code. So it's true that you cannot train a model yet to understand buildings, to understand connections and so on, but you can use these models to give it a series of prompts, and that creates, like in a grasshopper, you can connect prompts and it can create a connection of functions. So I can say, okay, create a system of grid lines, and then those grid lines goes in an input here, and then I said, take these grid lines and create columns at every intersection, and then it creates columns. And then I can say, take these columns and copy them to every floor. And at each step, it just simply creates a little bit of a function and executes it immediately. And when I realized I can do that, that's doable now. I showed some examples on my YouTube video. Then I realized a lot of it is going to change, and this automation is going to speed up. Since we are conservative, I think it's going to take some time. It's not going to be that fast. And those greatest minds that are in the AI space, they're not really in our sphere. They're in other spheres, especially like medicine and some other spheres. So it's our responsibility to progress on it. And it's, I think no one, as they say, all bets are off. I think no one knows how fast that's going to progress, but I think it's going to change a lot. I gave a prediction in my video. I said that I will repeat it here, that most software is basically you have a database, and then on top of that database, you have some functions that the people who made software provided for you. So for example, if you say create a planar surface from curves, that's a function that takes curves from the database, creates a surface, returns the surface to the database, right? And how do you call those functions? You have the third layer, you have the user interface, icons, menus, and so on. And so I said, these functions, they're going to be created on the fly now. So now I can say create a planar surface from curves, and it doesn't have to call this prepared function. It can create one on the fly and do it. So this layer will be simply replaced by like a brain that creates code on the fly for you. And what's the user interface? Well, the user interface is not icons and menus anymore because they called prepared functions. The user phase is prompts, is a system of prompts. Is that going to look like I said, Grasshopper, so you connect prompts, or is there going to be some kind of different prompt way? I don't know, but I think that's the future. Now, is it the future in 6 months or 6 years or 20 years? I don't know. But I don't think that's far away. And how that changes our whole way of work, no one knows. No one knows. Unfortunately, most of the time, automation changes it so that it just speeds up. It's not like it frees us so we work 2 days a week and take the rest off. No, it's just that before we used to need 1 year to make a house. Now we will need 2 months to make a house. That's all. But it will still go speed up and speed up. So we'll see how those changes affect us.
Yeah, I really like the perspective. Though some of the developer might have defined some of the function thinking the user will use that way. But now with this, if you can create function on the fly, then like maybe, and it's like recipe creation, and then you can mix various function and become a composite function, and that becomes, so I think, yeah, I'm just also thinking what are the IP a firm would create in the time of AI. And from my experiences, like a lot of the documents format we have in drawings, is not like LLM ready or consumable, and you lose a lot of information once you translate into 2D drawing format and trying to get. So even preparing the data structure would be crucial.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, there is still going to be some IP, like, as I said, people will start using their own AI models, fine-tuned with their own data. And of course, for that, you need data. So that will be beneficial for larger offices that have a lot of projects, a lot of drawings, a lot of details, a lot of 3D models. They can fine-tune some models to work on their data. But I don't know how it will all play out. We'll see, because creating these functions on the fly will make us be more and more these software architects. We have to think about these bigger compositions. How do they all functions connect into one larger plugin or whatever? So I think the software will become more and more complex and more detailed, and we will rely more and more on the AI to do the code. And the upside is we'll be able to do more. We'll just be able to do a lot more, right? With like you'll be able to do some combined sun analysis and rain analysis and life cycle assessment analysis and optimize the solution based on something that it's not possible now, or you would need 5 years to write the software for that. Those things will, and for example, there is also area of interconnectedness. We talk a lot about smart buildings, smart cities, and so on. So when you start connecting the buildings, and if you want to, let's say, create a web platform that manages a smart city or something, you would have to employ now 100 developers, or they would have to work for 5 years and so on. But those complexities can now be handled faster and faster with fewer people, because you can then say to AI, try to build me this software. So as I said, we never know how much complexity is there to reach. So maybe the AI will just enable us to reach more and more complexity and not take away from our work as developers, let's say.
Interesting. I see you have a great books collection. What would be like a top 3 that you would recommend AEC technologists?
Oh, that's not a good question, because I rarely read books about AC. I mean, this is just a couple of books here. I have much more. I read a lot of sci-fi, and sometimes some novels. So let me see if I have something here. No, Like I have some interesting here. For example, I have technical books like this is the nerves book, which tells you all about all the mathematics of the nerves. I have, for example, the book about Japanese joinery, which I love, and this is very interesting because of this software of mine, the gas software, where a lot of it is about creating automatic joints, and I do try to make a lot of Japanese joints out of that. So there's not so many recommendations. I usually use those technical books, but if you want to know something about the business and so on, that HOK book was pretty good. There is one by Edwin Catmull, the one that developed the Catmull-Clark algorithm called Creativity. That's a very good book about organization. And I have a lot at home that I can't remember now. There is one by Alain de Botton. He is that philosopher that has the channel Happiness something. He's a very famous philosopher, British philosopher. And he wrote a book that's called, yeah, I can just Google it out. Alain de Botton, Happiness, The Architecture of Happiness. That was a very interesting book for me. I don't think I have it here, no, because he tries to explain what is beautiful and why are some things beautiful, and talks about architecture a lot. And I found his approach very, very interesting because he thinks that what we find beautiful is what we are missing in life at that moment. That's a bit hard to explain, but let's say if he says that, imagine if your life is very confusing and very complex and very chaotic, then most probably you will find beautiful like some minimalistic architecture or minimalistic, because that calms you down, because that's what you're missing. And other way around, maybe you're bored in your life and maybe you want some excitement. So then maybe you will be drawn to some postmodern things that are full of colors and so on. So that's a very, very simplified way of talking about it, but it was the first explanation of how beauty can be maybe objectified in a sense, objectified for each person, but a bit of scientifically explained, because I like when things are things that are ungraspable are tried to be explained at least scientifically. So that one influenced me a lot in the way I see beauty and see architecture.
That's quite interesting. What would be your piece of advice for architecture students?
For architecture students, I didn't think about this in recent times. So, because it's a very interesting question, because 10 years ago, my advice was, yeah, get more technical, because architects were pushed out of the field because architectural studies were more on the creative side. And so everything technical was taken over by others. They were taken over by civil engineers, mechanical engineers, and so on. And as the buildings get more and more complex, and they do, because we develop software, develop machines, develop different systems, so the building get more complex, they get more and more technical. So the less you know, the less work you have. Now it's an interesting turning point, right? Because technical things are being covered by AI. Right? So now it's kind of the creativity part that's missing. So what I would suggest is that you still need to be technical, but in a different way. Now, I didn't think about this, so I'm trying to do it off the top of my head as I'm speaking, but you would need to research AI, but research how AI models work. Understand the basics of how they work. Understand the basics of neural networks, the forward pass, the backward pass. What are neurons? What are the parameters? How does the transformers network work? So that you understand when you prompt something, what it does. Once you do that, then you can concentrate a lot on the creative side and on building these systems of prompts. So I think people at the beginning of ChatGPT used to talk a lot about prompt engineering. It's how do you create your prompts to get the best answer. So this prompt engineering, I think it's going to develop in a science in its own, but it's not only now about single prompts. It's not about how to write a sentence. It will be how to create a system in which you design a building by using 3,000 prompts in the next month. But how do you structure these 3,000 prompts? What do you ask? What do you get as an output? Then maybe take that, get this output, then take that, and from that provide 10 variations and so on. So this kind of, in software development, there is a job called software architect. Software architect doesn't code, but it develops the architecture of the software itself. So in the similar way that the software architect works, I think this concentrating on this kind of systems of design is very important to understand the whole design process and what phases you're going through, and in what phases you get to variations, and when you decide on variations. So when you map out these diagrams, then you can start for each node in that diagram to create different prompts, because you won't be able to avoid that, like, because people that use AI will be faster than you, will be more precise than you, even more creative than you. So you have to, as a student, the good news is you have to develop further your creative side, because AI can help with that creativity. You can prompt mid-journey, but I still think that the creativity is on our side, because we understand what humans want, how humans tick, and so on. And we are still the one that have to choose that. I think there was, I don't know who I heard quoting, I heard Ben Affleck quoting some writer that said, art is knowing when to stop. So AI, if you prompt it to generate pictures, it will generate pictures into infinity. But if you, as an artist, you have to know when to stop. You have to know when you say this one, stop, this is my choice. So that's still going to be your choice, right? You have AI that can create infinity options, but your job will be to tell well to stop and go to the next stage. So that would be my advice. Focus on the creativity, that's great, and focus on understanding these systems. Do you have to learn how to code? 10 years ago I said yes. Now I'm saying no. But it would be very, very, very beneficial to know how to code, just so you understand when AI produces something, how it produces it, or that you can even manually sometimes tweak it and look at it and so on. So that's beneficial, not necessary anymore. But yeah, that's a general overview that I got off the top of my head. If I had to think about it more, probably it would be more smart and more concise.
I love the advice. Like I I I could connect it at so many levels to like build on top of that. Like people sometimes give flow plan PDF to ChatGPT and like answer it, and sometimes it just does OCR and it thinks, oh, ChatGPT can understand plan, but it doesn't know the arrangement. And if you go like what's the encoder it was trained, it was like just differentiating things, not like doesn't really understand flow plan. So knowing when to use for which use case and when does it not work was one thing that came to my mind. And second, as you were telling about systems, it also made me think about like for different tasks and phases, like what prompt you use, what function you give access to, and how do you develop that workflow, and your workflow becomes your own IP. Because if you make it too generic, then the option space is large and it doesn't flow. So if you, how can you narrow down and have a balance of like, okay, because if you keep it open-minded, it keeps on generating functions.
Yeah.
Say,
And what model to use, right? We have
yeah.
different models. We have diffusion models that generate images. We have different models that generate text. We have some models that are specialized for code, and we will see that more and more of that, right? There is very, very different models trained on different data. So you also have to understand what does that mean and how, which model to use for which prompt. That's also part of the system, right? So you can't prompt the model that Midjourney uses in the same way that you prompt OpenAI, because I've seen that. I've seen, for example, my wife wanted to generate something on Midjourney, and she wrote a sentence like it's for ChatGPT, and I said, no, it's not the same model. You can't do it like that. I said Midjourney like doesn't really understand the context like the large language model does. You have to give it key points. You say creative, beautiful, colorful. You don't need to create a sentence. It works with these words, you know. So you
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
understand the models and what prompts models takes to be able to use them perfectly. Yeah.
Last but not the least, anything which we didn't cover in this interview and you'd like to share that message on an ending note?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we covered a lot of stuff. I'm trying to think of something that we didn't cover. No, I mean, we covered somehow weirdly the most important things, and the most important things that we should have covered, and I think we did, are the ones that are not really technical. They're connected to the things that computational designers face outside the technical difficulty. So the technical things aside, we know you learn how to code, you create plugins, you use AI, and so on. Everybody knows that. But what people don't know is this business side and how hard that is. And what they also don't know is somehow very hard to market. You have to choose what you do. You have to be careful when you're choosing what you do. You have to imagine how you want to market yourself, how you want to find the clients, and so on. For example, when I went into this generating plugins for fabrication and so for facade planners or generating everything to the details, CNC files, machine files. I was excited because, okay, that's great. You know, we can apply these algorithms, automate so much and so on. And then when I realized I want to show that because you know, I have a YouTube channel, I have this propensity to show stuff. I realized I can't show anything. Everything is protected, you know. And then I was a little bit jealous of, let's say like that, of some people that work in the design phase. Let's say someone that works with AI and visualization, and every day they can show a different picture, like what they produce or how they worked on design. I can't show anything, you know. I have to write a text or something, but that's not so. You have to think about it and create a strategy for it to how you, if you're okay with that, because that's a personal thing. That's because in my case, I'm not okay with that because I have this personality that wants to share a lot. That's another of those drives that we talk about. That it's inexplicable. I don't know where it comes from. But if I learned something, I immediately in my head think about how I would structure it in a class, in a lesson to explain it to someone. And then some of it I structure it into a YouTube video where I explain the mathematics of NURBS, or I explain. Now I have one that's going to go out, I think soon. That's I explain the sub D in Rhino, the subdivision, and so I immediately had this urge to share. And when I work on these cool projects like the Las Vegas Sphere, and we generate all these aluminum profiles, 30,000 of them, and we export everything to the machine code directly, and I like imagine how I would explain that, how I would create a chain and say, look, we took a single line. From that line, we created a 3D profile. From that 3D profile, we automatically created the holes and pockets. And then we took that and automatically created the CNC. Here is how that works. And then I realized I can't show. I'm not allowed to show any of that. And that's the part that's interesting for people to think about when they choose what they're doing or how they're doing. If that is important for them, do not go in the direction where the IP laws are very, very strict. But aside from that, nothing is coming to me off the top of my head. There is many subjects for sure, but yeah, right. Some other time.
That's yeah. You have definitely a person with so many interests and so many interesting things we could chat about. But I had a great time hosting you, Milos. It's yeah, really
Thank you.
find your work very inspiring. So like, always look
Thank
forward to
you.
what you have on YouTube.
Thank you very much. You're doing a great service to the community by talking about this thing. It's very nice to have people talking about this, and it's yeah. I'm looking forward to the next conversation that you have, not only with me, of course, with everybody else. Looking forward to watching it.